Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. Today is Tuesday, October 20th. This is the community meeting. So we'll go ahead and get started. It looks like in our agenda, I think Steve posted the HackMD in the agenda notes there. So feel free to go in there and add something if you want to chat about anything. So I guess we can jump down to what we've been working on. So Steve K, you're working on multi-arch Docker images.
Yeah, I picked this up last week. We had a few folks who were interested in running Contour on Raspberry Pi clusters or Graviton machines. So we added multi-arch support to the Docker images initially just for AMD 64 and for ARM 64. And so this is essentially totally transparent to the user. So you just continue to pull the same image name and tag as you were before, and your Docker daemon essentially knows how to pull the correct architecture based on where you're running. So we've tested this for AMD 64 to make sure it continues to work there. But for anyone who's interested in running on ARM, it'd be great if you could test out the main images that are tracking our main branch that are up on Docker Hub. I have the link there. And just give us any feedback. But pretty excited to ship this in the next release.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Thanks, Steve. It's really cool that that it works. That it just works. TM.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. We did this for Valero a little while ago, and folks were definitely happy to have it. So glad to bring it to Contour too.
Awesome.
I guess the last thing worth mentioning there is that Envoy, I think as of 1.16, also added multi-arch support. So that's part of the reason for now bringing it to Contour as well.
Yeah, I know Matt on Knative has also been messing around with that. So he did the same, where he's running Contour on ARM with Envoy and ARM as well for Knative stuff. So it's kind of cool. Very cool. And then Daniel, you have some stuff about the operator.
Yeah, actually, we're really close to the operator supporting the example Contour deployment. I need to figure out the best approach for managing the Contour series like HTTP proxy. The other thing that I found, and I mean, the first time that I actually got something working, minus the fact of just manually adding the Contour CRDs to the cluster, I had the Contour operator manage all other pieces of the puzzle. But I did, last couple hours, ran into issue 2122, which in the discussion, I have a link to that. This is preventing, aside from the standard example deployment, what I was hoping to accomplish with the first release of the Contour operator was actually supporting multiple contours, either per namespace or multiple across multiple namespaces. And this ran in, I ran into this issue, and so. With the example Contour deployment, most everything's named Contour or Envoy or what have you, and we're using the CertGen to generate the certificates. And the problem that we have in supporting multiple contours per namespace is that the Contour operator instantiates the resources using a more detailed naming so that we can actually support multiple instances. If everyone's following that background there. So I guess, I just kind of bring this up. My thinking was, similar to the other CertGen flags, adding flags to CertGen that would allow a user to specify the subject with the fact that if it's not specified, then Contour would be used for the Contour TLS cert and Envoy would be used for the Envoy TLS cert.
Maybe we need to export that cert package like we did the config, and then allow the operator to just run it by hand without having to run the job. Might be another option. Then you could add the flags to do the same thing.
That would be.
Steve, do you mind? I was just
Sorry,
going to
you
say,
go,
Steve, do you mind, sorry, really quickly, Steve, do you mind making a comment in that issue
Yeah.
with, and anyone else who has any ideas on this topic? But yeah, if you don't mind adding maybe just a note there, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
whoever I was talking over, I apologize. I think maybe that was Nick.
Yeah, that's fine. I was actually just saying go ahead. So my thought there though is the only thing that I can think of, the only problem at all that I could see there is I think James commented on there earlier. I think that you may need to change Contour. You may need to tell Contour or Envoy to tell Contour to tell Envoy what the search should say, what the subject name should be. So there may just be a little bit you might have to do to make that thing work.
Okay, so
But
when
I think-
Contour is making a call to Envoy's management API, it's expecting.
It's actually the other way around. Envoy calls into Contour.
Okay.
And so because Envoy is technically the client in the TLS thing, it needs to verify the server cert. So that's where the subject name comes in. So it may just be that we might have to add something into the Bootstrap maybe, or I can't remember where that is specified, but that interaction does have that subject name specified somewhere. So whatever you put for that, you also will need to pass to Contour and or in some way. I think it's been a while since I built this.
Nick, do you
So
mind helping me out
I
too?
will-
Just maybe making
no
a
problem.
note on this issue.
Yep, no problem. I was planning. It was on my list of things to make a note on. However, because I've been away for 2 weeks, it's a pretty long list. So sorry.
I'm sure.
The
And what I was
idea
thinking
is-
about doing, it maybe in the meantime, is kind of pivoting in the sense of, okay, maybe for V1 Alpha 1 of Contour Operator, we don't support multiple namespaces, with a stretch goal of supporting multiple namespaces with getting this issue resolved. I think it just comes down to, if you look at the Contour Operator issue list already, it's growing pretty quickly. And so, so that's kind of my thinking as well. So, if this was an easy fix, then it'd be a slam dunk. Let's do it. But if it, so that's kind of just where my thinking is. I don't want to kind of lose momentum of the Contour Operator.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
James, were you talking before?
Yeah, I think the original goal is to get rid of Contour search in, right? And just have the operator directly generate the certificate secrets.
Yeah, I mean that would also be fine by me as well. So in which case Steve's suggested option would be helpful there. Having the search end library be exported, or having the controller just do the work itself. It's actually not complicated work. The search end stuff is not complicated at all. It's just a little involved because you've got to call the right libraries at the right time. That's all. So yeah, either one of those I think is fine. I will comment on that issue with just a thing about, hey, remember this is a TLS negotiation, so we've got to make sure that everybody knows the expected names. That's all. So if we change the defaulted names, then we might need to update it somewhere. Cool. So Steve and I will both comment on that issue, and I think we should be able to move forward there. Daniel.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. So I think if we got that closed up, then the next one I think is Nick talking about Ingress class and gateway class.
Yes, this is a big long issue. Sorry, I have typed a lot of words on there, but no one else has said much yet. So I am sorry for giving you all essays to read. But the key thing here is we can't move forward on either the Service APIs implementation or the Ingress v1 implementation until we make a firm decision on how we implement the class objects, that is Ingress class and gateway class. Ingress v1 has, in addition to the old Ingress class annotation, you can also have an Ingress class object. That's actually an object type that does basically the same thing as the annotation, but now it's an object. And there's a field in the Ingress v1 spec that refers you to that object. It's not so important for Ingress v1, but we just needed to, well, there is some places in there where you could possibly put some config and some stuff like that. And the same goes for the gateway class in the service APIs. Gateway class is like a bucket that holds gateways, but it can also hold config that should be applied across all of those gateways, thus making it a class of gateways. Because of that, because of the possibility of putting configuration in there, and also the fact that service APIs is a really big API that covers a lot of stuff that we may or may not want to do in Contour, it kind of comes down to a fundamental sort of, with forgiveness M2, a product question here. And my opinion on this is that Project Contour / Contour needs to be a HTTP ingress controller. We've talked before about adding TCP functionality, UDP functionality. I think that we should do that as part of Project Contour, the organization, but not in the Contour binary, so that we can keep the Contour binary tightly focused. The way that that interacts with this decision is because if we do that, then that means that for the service APIs for Project Contour / Contour, we will be able to implement like a slice of the API that that allows us to do HTTP ingress. There's a bunch of stuff that is not really relevant, except in the close details. Further down in that ticket, I've written a couple of big long essays talking about those things. Yeah, when it flows off more than one screen, I think I'm validated in calling it a big long essay. So there's, please everyone go and have a look. We need to talk on there. I need to make sure everyone understands what the hell I'm talking about. But I think that the key thing is we can't really make a decision on this without making a bit of a commitment to what is Project Contour / Contour. And if we are going to add other stuff like TCP or UDP that is more in the load balancing realm as opposed to HTTP ingress controller realm, then we need to have an answer for how we're going to do that for us to be able to pick how we do the gateway class to gateway to everything else thing for service APIs. Sorry, I talked a lot there. The floor is open. Please talk.
Okay, so go ahead, Daniel.
I was just going to say, with everyone's kind of detailed understanding of Contour, I mean, is there like components of Contour that would be applicable across different layers of load balancing? My question stems just from, right, if there's a separate repo and a separate project that handles TCP route for like layer 4 load balancing, is there going to be potentially a lot of duplication of code?
I think that's a very fair question, and I would say possibly. I don't think we're really going to know until we start doing it. I guess the key thing about my feeling about this is that effectively the place where I want to draw the line for Project Contour / Contour is that it will watch gateways, but it won't create them, and it will take whatever route objects it needs to do to be able to do HTTP and HTTPS forwarding in the same way that we do today with the current constructs. So it's going to be a bit fuzzy about exactly what layer it's at, because currently we allow you to do TLS forwarding, which is technically TCP forwarding, but the one that we build now, like we don't do any, it's not real TCP forwarding in what I would consider TCP forwarding, because we don't allow you to specify any port. You can only be one port. You need to be doing, your protocol needs to support SNI and a bunch of other constraints. And so like the two options we have are either we remove those constraints by changing Project Contour substantially to add scope, or we keep the current constraints, use Project Contour / Contour as a building block, and then build other building blocks maybe inside the project that allow us to create gateways or create the Envoy deployment that the Contour will configure. And that's kind of my feeling, is that the more modular approach is better because it keeps things tightly scoped and easier to draw a line around. But I've talked enough again, sorry. James, you were talking.
So I have a few thoughts. I think that the notion of having a gateway class be one-to-one with a data plane deployment makes sense. So I'm on board with that. And I think there's an opportunity to have, a separate component that deals with that. So I can imagine a controller which will deploy an Envoy data plane with various configurations. It will configure that Envoy data plane to rendezvous with a gateway class object. And you can auto scale up and down. And I think that's a component that can be hosted in Project Contour, but it's not Contour, the ingress controller itself. I'm skeptical about Contour the ingress controller as a dedicated, tightly scoped HTTP proxy. Because I think that service APIs blurs that line in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think if we want to stay within that boundary, then maybe you're actually moving up and you're going to start pushing yourself into the what's the term?
API gateway or web
API gateway. Yes. Yeah. So maybe you're like, okay, we're an opinionated API gateway. That's great. And you could have a different controller which actually implements the whole of the service API spec. I can see that could be sustainable. But I think that the sort of middle, I think we'll find that the middle ground is awkward. So service APIs is written such that you can kind of impose you can kind of have you can implement a subset of the API, right? But I think already Contour gets a lot of feedback from users and operators about I want to tweak specific things. I want to proxy in different ways, which kind of pushes it, which is already pushing it out of the opinionated HTTP only space. And I think trying to do service APIs is going to increase that pressure. But on the other hand, I think from where we are in the Contour ingress controller project now, I think that's a pretty reasonable initial direction.
Yeah.
I just think we have to keep an open mind about where we're going to end up. If we do end up with saying we want to split this out into multiple controllers, then we have to solve somehow that multiple controllers are implementing parts of the same gateway resource and talking to the same Envoy data plane, and that's hairy.
Yeah, so I think I agree with James. I think that the key part is to keep an open mind. I guess I'm thinking how the thing that I'm aiming for is how can we take what we've got and implement some sort of service API support so that we can, I want us to be one of the first people to get real service API support once the alpha API is released. And so basically what the thing I'm looking to do to start with is to get us implementing the slice of service APIs that covers what we do today. Preferably in such a way that we don't have to make huge sweeping changes down the road to the best of our knowledge. And I guess that's what I'm aiming for with talking about this thing. And that's what I think the model that I'm proposing, sort of how that works. But as I said, I have written a lot of stuff there that I haven't gone into here. I think the best place to have further discussion on this is on that issue. Please everyone check it out. Try your best to digest my essays and come back to me with questions. And I mean, I just wanted to propose something to get the conversation started. I'm not 100% wedded to it. If someone comes up with a better idea, I'm happy to take it. It's more just I wanted to get something started so that we actually have something to talk about and we're not just like shooting about details, having something to. Anyway, so that's what I just wanted to get that started. The timeline for this is I'd like to get this done. I'd like to get service APIs implemented by the end of the year, very soon after the Alpha 1 is released. And I believe the Alpha 1 should be released real soon now, Tia. So yeah, I'd like to get this done. I don't think the actual work to implement it once we pick a model is that hard, but it's the picking the model that's hard. I know, Steve, you did a bunch of work on ingress and ran up against this problem about what is an ingress class and what does it mean. And then you couldn't really move any further. So that's why this is a blocking issue for that further work.
Yeah, for sure. Is the hesitation to not do the TCP bits, is it a cultural thing or is it a like code thing? You want to make the code clean?
So
I mean,
I think the thing is, like, once you do actual TCP forwarding, you're now a layer 3, layer 4 load balancer. Once you're a layer 3 and 4 load balancer, you have to care deeply about all of the layer 3 and 4 stuff. How is the stuff routed? Do you expose routing? Do you interact with BGP? How does the routing work? Where do you get where does the traffic flow to and from? How do you, there's a whole bunch of, if you're adding new IP addresses, how do those IP addresses get added onto the machine that's actually hosting the envoys? How does there's this hundreds of decisions that you've got to make about that you don't have to make when it's, hey, I'm exposing a HTTP port and HTTPS port and doing routing based on domain names, which is what we do now.
I don't think that those problems are sort of fundamentally different to what we have now. I think they're different I think that I agree though that you probably have a bit more emphasis on them in a TCP world. It's tricky to think. I think we need to think deeply about what we mean by addressing in a gateways world, because the gateway controller was sort of expected to do addressing somehow, and there's no good way to do that in Kubernetes. Yeah. One of the big problems I think for Contour as a HTTP controller is we have this notion of secure and insecure ports, and there's really no corresponding notion of that in the gateway API. The gateway API just says, here's a port number, you're doing HTTPS on it. Right, so we can't. There's no way to automatically set up, HTTP redirects to the HTTPS port, because there's no way in the API to express that direct relationship.
Yeah.
So that's sort of an argument for. So that could be some sort of argument for a high level control, a high level protocol specific controller on top of service APIs. Not quite sure how that looks.
Yeah. So I guess to sort of more fully answer your question, Steve, I've been part of some experiments where we've looked at how to implement some of the layer 3 and 4 load balancing, both in various clouds and on bare metal. And what I noticed there was that I think, Steve, you were part of the same thing, right? And one of the things that I noticed that other people were finding is that as soon as you start talking layer 3, you have to have you care a lot more deeply about the infrastructure that is on the layer 2, and the infrastructure that directly underlays you is far more important than once you're talking about layer 7. When you're talking about layer 7, you're abstracted away enough that it's okay that you can just be like, hey, as long as packets can get where they need to go, I don't really care. Once you're talking about layer 3 and 4 load balancing, there's a lot more interaction required with the underlying network kit. And that's whether that be programming, cloud networking, or programming bare metal stuff, it doesn't matter. There's a lot more interaction with that. And that's the thing that I find scary, in terms of adding that extra surface area to Project Contour/Contour. It's not scary in the sense that it's insolvable. Lots of people have had solutions to it. But it's something that would dramatically expand the scope of the Contour, the Contour repo. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. I think that one of the things that has given us as much success as we have with Contour is that Contour is pretty tightly focused. And I really want to try and maintain that tight focus as much as possible.
Yeah, and I do agree with a lot of your perspective, Nick, in the sense that it seems as projects expand their scope, many, if not most of those projects kind of lose what they did well at the beginning of the project, right? And if we think about layer 3, layer 4 load balancing, Contour does what it does and does it well. If we expand the scope and And I think it's a different story if it's like expanding the scope to solve a problem that no one else in the industry has really solved. But when it comes to layer 3, layer 4 load balancing, there's a lot of options already out there. You know, if it's via cloud load balancers, or one of the projects that comes to my mind is something like Metal LB that does a lot of good layer 3, layer 4 load balancing for Kubernetes environments. And it just seems like there'd be a lot of duplication potentially of other projects that maybe it makes sense to add that service API support in something like Metal LB, as opposed to making Contour a layer 3, layer 4 load balancer.
So then if you go down that path, like if you follow that to its logical conclusion, then maybe you have to say the Contour doesn't deal with gateway classes at all.
So I think what I'm proposing is the only way that Contour deals with gateway classes in that it's a bucket of gateways. That's it. Like that's the, and the only reason to do that is because a gateway has multiple listeners, and those multiple listeners can be merged. And in fact, for Contour, we would want to specify that only mergeable listeners are valid for Contour, but there's no reason why the listeners that Contour looks at need to be all in the same gateway. And so if you're talking about more than one gateway, then the thing that you're talking about is a gateway class. And that's the only reason why I say gateway class, as opposed to just saying specify a single gateway, is because listeners can be merged across gateways. And that's the only reason to say a gateway class at all. Again, I've taken a lot of time for this, and I'm sorry, but
I think this is important.
I think that we really need to make sure that we talk on the issue about this as well, so we've got everything recorded for posterity.
Yeah, I put a link in the chat window as well as that issue 2809. And what it is a reference to the first implementation of service APIs that I came across. And so, Nick, I wasn't sure if you were aware of this. I think the reason I bring it up is for me personally, it helps me a lot when I see like an implementation that I could reference, right, and understand how did these guys implement service APIs. And I think in the sense of Contour, this is even more valuable because this is based on Istio, and there's some similarities there with Envoy. So with that said, I just wanted to share that, and I wasn't sure, Nick, if you've seen this, and if you haven't, maybe if it's worth actually kind of diving into the implementation a little bit to see if there's some things that can be learned from it.
Yeah, so that's great. Yeah, I had not seen that before. So yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, we'll check that out. Thanks, Daniel. Well, I think we're out of time. Anything else anyone wants to add? I think there's nothing else on our list of things to talk about. Just, I guess, in an hour and a half, I have the Utah Kubernetes meetup. So if you want to hear more about Contour, come join me in an hour and a half.
Good luck. Have fun.
Good luck.
We'll demo auth, James. So shiny bits of auth.
Oh, apparently there's a Istio server which does OIDC and has a bunch of stuff.
Nice.
So we might not need to build that. Yay.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. I guess the next meeting is next Tuesday, US time, so 1 o'clock Eastern. And I think next week we also have office hours. So I will. That's it. So we'll end it today. Thanks everyone for coming, and we'll catch y'all later.
Thanks everyone.
Come on.